Good morning, and thanks, Bill. I think EJ just stepped out of the room. We appreciate the invite to be here today, but only someone like EJ who follows tax policy as closely as I do may remember about 10 years ago we had legislation introduced in New York State that would have imposed an excise tax on the sale of marijuana as a new enforcement mechanism. So we've been talking about marijuana taxes for a while, not necessarily in this context. I represent an organization, we're the statewide Chamber of Commerce. We have about 2,400 private sector members across the state. And I think it's fair to say we have no position on the threshold issue of legalization of recreational marijuana. I know we have members who have strong opinions on it, but as a general issue, we're not there yet. But we certainly look at, I think some of us may consider recreational marijuana an inevitability in New York State. And if that were to be the case, we certainly have concerns about how this is going to be dealt with in the workplace, especially dealing with the likelihood of workplace impairment. And to get into the weeds, as our session is entitled, we look at the legislation that was introduced as part of the governor's executive budget proposal. And it creates a new, and we think fairly high, no pun intended, standard for employers to respond to marijuana-based impairment in the workplace. Right now, we're at will employment state. If you come to work under the influence of alcohol, let alone impaired by alcohol, your employer can take very decisive employment action. Employers have a vested interest in protecting the safety of individual workers, including the worker who may be impaired, other workers around them, customers, general public, the reputation and performance of the business. And we see no particular reason, we see no reason at all, why workplace impairment should be differentiated. The standard for workplace impairment response should be different based on the intoxicant. One of the provisions of the bill says the employer has to document that some discrete job function is explicitly impaired due to cannabis in order to take legal action. How about the person falls down the stairs going from one floor to the other and the employer has legal responsibility for the injuries? We don't see the reason for the difference. We've approached the governor's office and both houses of the legislature to address that standard. A real practical issue if we move in the direction of legalized recreational marijuana. There's a second piece in the bill we found surprising, I think, is maybe the mildest word I could use for it, where when envisioning this new marketplace for the growing and processing and selling of recreational marijuana, there's a provision that says if you get a license, to get one of these licenses from the state, if you're an employer with more than 25 employees, you must have an organized workforce. We think that's contrary to federal law. Employers are, prohibited from involving themselves in their workers' unionization decision, but also presupposes that the workers have no right to vote on whether they want to be unionized or not. I suspect that will fall out of the bill, but we thought it was somewhat of a remarkable proposal to be in there. Heather talked about some of the other practical issues. We represent a lot of members in the financial service industry and agree that there's significant uncertainty as to how, whether you're a state chartered bank, how you might participate in this. But those are the major issues that we're looking at. It's going to be interesting to see how this issue develops through the 2019 legislative session. Thanks.